All right, Sarah, I'm going to mute myself and you're ready to go. You can go right ahead, Sarah.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome. We will get started here shortly. We're just going to wait. Got a few more people joining us in the waiting room, and we'll share introductions and get started with this very important topic and presentation. Right. Good evening and welcome to our second annual Beaverton School District Virtual Senior College Week. My name is Sarah Seaborg and I'm a counselor at Early College High School here in the school district. And thank you so much for joining us this evening. Tonight's presentation is part of a week-long informational series. Tonight is our kickoff night. We hope you'll join us for the other presentations this week. All of the presentations will be recorded and available on the Beaverton School District website shortly after the conclusion of the presentation. And this week, all of the presentations will be in English, and next week, the same presentations will be offered in Spanish. Tonight's topic, Financial Aid 101, is likely to generate a lot of questions. Please save your questions until the end of the presentation, at which time we'll have you put your questions into the chat. Now I'd like to introduce tonight's presenter. Matthew Sagayaga is a financial aid advisor at Portland Community College, and he's been in the financial aid field for about 20 years. And we're really fortunate to have him here this evening to share his knowledge. So I'll pass it on to you, Matt. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. As Sarah said, my name is Matthew Sagayaga. I'm a financial aid counselor at Portland Community College. Just want to let you know that the examples or some of the things that you'll be seeing tonight will be from PCC, obviously, because that's where I work. But a lot of the information is general. So the schools that you will be looking at will have similar content or information or processes that we have. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. If I can, oh, there we go. Okay. So today we're talking about the financial aid basics. Financial aid can be a very scary thing, but as long as you have these basics down, it does get easier with time. Like Sarah said, I've been in the industry for about 20 years, and there are a lot of things that pop up and surprise me, or I need to do refreshers. So don't feel like you need to be an expert on this by the time that tonight is over, or by the time you need to start filling out your FAFSA. We'll also talk about the financial aid cycle, because you do need to apply for financial aid every year. And then the communications between the students and financial aid once the student is accepted. Lastly, I will have some valuable additional resources for stuff that students or resources that students can take a look at on top of federal or state financial aid, such as scholarships. Okay. What is financial aid? Financial aid can get kind of confusing because sometimes students or parents think financial aid is only federal grants or state grants, but there are actually two other programs part of financial aid, which is federal work study and loans for both students and parents, okay? So with grants, do remember that that is free money. You don't need to pay that back like the federal loans if you do accept, but grants are awarded to students right off the bat. Once we take a look at your FAFSA, we do need to take a look at your estimated family contribution. Now I want you to remember that estimated family contribution, or EFC for short, because this is the number that we derive off of tax information that will let us know who is eligible for grants, which is considered a need-based aid. So once you fill out your FAFSA application should give you an estimated family contribution, and that'll kind of help you gauge whether or not the student is eligible for grants or need-based aid. Obviously, the lower that EFC is, closer to 0, the more eligibility the student gets. But as that estimated family contribution increases, then the eligibility also increases, okay? With the EFC, or estimated family contribution, we do need to take into account tax information from 2 years prior. We also take a look at who's in the household. So if it's mom, dad, brother, sister, if you have grandma in there that your parents are supporting, we'll have to take a look at everybody that is in that household. And also some other assets that students may have. So that all goes into the calculation to determine who is eligible for these awards, okay? Next is work study. So work study, I did mention, is part of the financial aid, or part of the financial aid awarding. And work study is also a need-based award. So that means we do need to take into consideration that estimated family contribution. Now, work study is an amount that is granted to a student where they can get a school-approved job on campus. There are a few off-campus jobs, but I would definitely direct you to the work study website of the school that you are attending to take a look at their processes, especially this time that maybe there might not be a lot of work study jobs because your classes might be hybrid, or there might not be a lot of work on campus due to the pandemic. But definitely follow up with your school. Work study jobs, like I said, is basically an award that a student gets, but they don't get the money right off the bat, okay? It's pay as you earn. It's gonna be basically a set amount of dollars that a student can earn for the full year. So for instance, a work study award could be $3,000 for $1,000 for each term that you're attending. So if you're a semester school, technically you'll have about $1,500 per term, or if you're a trimester school, you'll have about $1,000 each term that you can earn. And this goes to the other components of your cost of attendance, such as books and supplies, living. If you do choose to use some of your work study to pay any outstanding bill with the school, you will need to contact the bursar's office to see how that works out. Usually students will get paid at the end of each month. And if they wanted to use the money to pay some of their tuition, if they do have a bill, they will need to actually go through basically the payment process that the school has. And student loans. A lot of times parents and students do not realize that student loans is part of financial aid. So if you fill out your FAFSA form and you see the grants and the work study, and then you're surprised that you see the loans, keep in mind that you are also applying for these loans through the FAFSA process, or the free application for federal student aid. Now with student loans, you do need to actively accept it. So it's not something that is going to be, that you're going to be responsible for right off the bat. Only if amounts pay out is when students are usually responsible for the loans. Okay, if you accidentally accept the loan, there are going to be some processes that will roadblock the payment of money. So there is some room if students accidentally accept it, okay? Definitely call the school that you're interested in if you accidentally accept it, and they'll tell you what processes to go through. Okay, and then lastly, scholarships. Scholarships are basically through applications. It's not through FAFSA. Usually schools do have scholarship websites. Community organizations might offer scholarships or work. There are a lot of scholarships that are out there for students to apply for. I will encourage students to diversify where you're looking for scholarships. For instance, go to a library or a bookstore if they're open, and take a look at what scholarship books that are out there, scholarships that are in print. There are some scholarships on there that are only in print and not necessarily online because they want to push students to these other resources. So when in doubt, don't just rely on the web for scholarships because, you know, about 90% of college students are probably going to be searching for scholarships on the web, but take a look what else is around you. So in books, within your community and that sort of thing. Okay. So like I said, employer benefits. So your parents might have benefits for their students or your employer. I had a student call me the other day asking if we got the payment from McDonald's. Apparently McDonald's does have a program out there that has some tuition benefits for students. So definitely contact your employer, even if you don't know, it doesn't hurt to ask, okay? If you belong to a tribe, some tribal funds or tribal scholarships could come through, or military benefits that you're eligible for. So there are two types of student loans that are out there. The first is the subsidized loan. The second is the unsubsidized loan. If you notice in the slide, the subsidized loan has a green underline in that. And that indicates that the subsidized loan is the better of the two loans. The reason why it's a better than the two loans that students are eligible for is because the interest, while the student is still in school, will be subsidized by the federal government. So the interest will not accrue as long as you're registered for 6 or more credits. Now, if you drop below those 6 credits, or if you just stop out and not continue going to school, your loans will go through a grace period. And then the interest will start accruing on the subsidized loan at that point, okay? But as long as you're enrolled for at least 6 credits, those subsidized interest rates or the subsidized interest will be deferred, okay? The second loan is the unsubsidized loan. So that is the loan that accrues interest and the student is responsible for the interest while they're in school. Each quarter or each month, the student might get a statement from the unsubsidized lender, letting the student know this is what your payment or your interest payments are for the month. And the student can choose to either pay it then or pay it after they graduate. But do remember, if you're putting off that payment, you're now paying compounded interest. So it is highly recommended that students do try to take care of their interest while they're still in school. If you do need to take out the unsubsidized loan, make sure that you're taking out the minimal amount, just so it doesn't get out of hand or you know, students are paying more than they actually should. Okay, with these federal loans, everybody is eligible for them. My favorite story is if Bill Gates filled out a FAFSA form, he would actually get a financial aid award letter from PCC because he would be eligible for these unsubsidized loans. Now, if you remember in the last slide, I did mention that if you accidentally accept the loans, there are going to be some things that'll be in the way that will, you know, obviously stop those payments from paying out, such as the entrance counseling. So if you accidentally accept the loan, but you don't do that entrance counseling, for the most part, that money won't pay through, and it'll give you a little bit of time where you can actually contact the school that you're attending and say, I do not want those loans. If you could please cancel them or what do I need to do to decline the loans I accidentally accept? So one of the things that's going to hold the payment is whether or not you do your entrance counseling. Another is the loan agreement or master promissory note. That's also a hurdle that students or a task that students need to do to have access to those funds. So again, if you accidentally accepted a loan, you did the entrance counseling. If you didn't do the loan or the master promissory note, those funds won't get released to the school, okay? So there are some stops. Each term, a student does need to be registered for a minimum of 6 credits for most of their award eligibility. So if you take a look or remember the types of awards that that I talked about earlier, you will need 6 credits if you have, or if you're accepting the loans. So the subsidized or unsubsidized loan. There are some federal grants that require at least 6 credits, and some state grants that also need a minimum of 6 credits for those awards to pay out. If you aren't taking the maximum full-time load at 12 credits and you're taking 6 credits, your award or your grants could be prorated because we do need to take enrollment into account. So what I tell students is if they can or if they want the maximum eligibility that they are awarded, they will need to be in at least 12 credits. But overall, if you want most of your financial aid eligibility, you need to be registered for at least 6, okay? The only grant that you can have at less than 6 credits is gonna be your Pell Grant. And basically you'll receive a quarter of that full-time eligibility where that Pell Grant is concerned if you take less than 6 credits, okay? Grace periods are if you do take out the student loans, usually grace periods is going to be 6 months after graduation or your last term of attendance. So if you do accept these loans, the federal government is not going to make you go into repayment the month or the month after you graduate or stop going to school. You will have at least 6 months to kind of get your affairs in order if you need to with the loans and kind of start to manage what loan payments would look like within that time. And then with repayment, there are a lot of repayment options that are out there. I will encourage students to take a look at studentaid.gov, which is a federal website that talks about some of the repayment options that are out there. I don't know if some of you've heard, but there's that public service student loan forgiveness program that's been in the news. So if you're going to go into a service profession, that might be something that you might take a look at. But I do encourage you to go to studentaid.gov for more information. Okay. So with a financial aid cycle, a lot of times students think that they only need to fill out a FAFSA form once through their college career, but you actually need to fill out a FAFSA form every year. Eligibility does change from year to year, so that's the reason why we do need to take a look at that. And also for Oregon students who aren't able to fill out the FAFSA form, you will be able to fill out an ORSA form, which is basically the state FAFSA form. And we can take a look to see what state aid you could be eligible for, okay? The FAFSA and ORSA forms are usually available on October 1st for this year. So for instance, we're in the 2021 school year. But the FAFSA form for next year, for the 22-23 school year, I do see a typo, I'm sorry, on the presentation, will be available on October 1st. So if you are planning to start school in summer of 22 or fall of 22, you will want to have filled out the FAFSA form that was available this past October 1st, 2021. So if you haven't taken a look at that, I do encourage you to take a look at that and try to apply as early as you can. You will need tax information for 2021 to fill out that FAFSA form though, okay? I did mention before that a lot of schools do have scholarship programs. So for instance, the PCC Foundation Scholarship application is currently open now with a deadline of March 1st of next year. OSAC has a similar application or website for scholarships. And then there's also those web scholarships, those searches that you can go ahead and go through, okay? Okay, so to receive financial aid, obviously you do need to fill out the FAFSA or ORSA form if you need to. And you also need to be at least applied or formally admitted to the institution. Now, FAFSA will send the information to the schools that you list on your FAFSA. I think you can list up to 10 schools, regardless if you've applied to those schools or not. Those schools will not do anything with that information until you're formally admitted. So if you turned in your FAFSA form to PCC and Mount Hood Community College, but you were only you only have an admissions or only accepted to PCC, your financial aid information will be processed in our office and you will get an award letter. Whereas if at Mount Hood, since you weren't admitted there, they'll just have your information, but they won't do anything with it, okay? A lot of times, schools will request for additional documentation. Sometimes that is tax information. Sometimes that is citizenship information. If a school is requesting for any documentation, please do not put it off. Turn it in as soon as you get that information and submit those documents, because there could be a turnaround time from when we can review that information from when you accepted it, or if we need other information, if that makes sense, okay? Once everything is in order, all your documents are submitted if we're requesting for it, you will receive an award letter. At that point, you will need to decide what awards you're gonna accept. So if you're awarded grants, federal work study and loans, grants will already be automatically accepted for you in most instances, because we do not want you to decline it. If you do need to decline your grants, definitely talk to your financial aid office. But you will need to accept the federal work study or that loan eligibility that we talked about earlier, okay? Once those are all accepted, or the awards that you are accepted, and you're registered for at least 6 credits, we'll be able to receive your funds, pay off your bill, or pay as much of the bill we can. After that, if there's an additional bill that the student is responsible for, they will get another bill from the institution. Or if there is excess funds. So if your bill was paid off, but you had a little bit of excess funds, that will go to the student in the form of a refund, which like work study, you could put towards the other components of your cost of attendance, such as books and supplies or living, okay? Students will need to maintain financial aid eligibility, okay? To maintain eligibility, students will need to have a GPA of a 2.0 or above and pass 67% of their classes. Now, how we figure out that 67% is we divide, or we take a look at what you're attempting and we divide it by what you're actually passing. As long as that percentage rate is above 67%, you're good to go. Once your eligibility dips below any of those 2 categories, so if it dips below a 2.0 or that 67%, a student will have a warning term to try to get that SAP or satisfactory academic progress requirements up. If that doesn't happen, then students, the term after, will probably have their financial aid held. At that point, students should get information about a petition process to see if we can get that eligibility back for students. So if you dip below that, do know that there are some processes that we can go through to get back your eligibility. So definitely do keep in touch with your financial aid office and your academic advisor in that case also, to make sure that we have a plan in action or that you are on course in maintaining eligibility. Okay, so some lingo, you probably heard me talk a little bit about just a second ago, but disbursement is obviously when the payment from financial aid goes into the PCC account. Disbursement happens the second week of the term at PCC. In some instances, disbursements at an institution could be the first day of school, or schools could have disbursements available for students prior to school starts. So they have that refund if they're eligible for it, to buy their books and supplies and whatnot, and get that start up for their first term in college, or their next term in college. Now, if the student is eligible for refunds, the students usually can choose how those refunds get to them. Most students will choose the direct deposit option into their personal bank account. Sometimes schools will have a disbursement card, so they might work with a company to have those disbursements go onto a separate debit card, or they can receive a paper check. The direct deposit into your personal bank account or a paper check will usually be a longer turnaround time than if you get a school-approved debit card, or that card I was just talking about. But definitely call or talk to the schools that you're interested in to see what options they offer on getting any refunds to students that they are eligible for. Okay. Excuse me. Sometimes schools will have programs where students can charge their books or transportation to the student account. This right here is specific to PCC. So with PCC, you are able to charge books to your student account and have financial aid take care of it once it comes through. With bus passes or parking, because PCC is mostly online right now, that's the reason why it's X'd out. So please keep in mind that this is specific to PCC. If you have any other questions about these type of programs at the schools you're interested in, I will direct you to those institutions. Okay, so I actually just went over this a little bit ago, that SAP to maintain eligibility, that satisfactory academic progress. Students do also have a credit limit for the programs they are interested in. The government does allow a student basically 150% of time limit. So basically that's going to be, for instance, if you're taking a 4-year degree, it's going to be the 4 years plus 50%, so technically about 6 years that you can have financial aid eligibility. If you do creep up against that 150% credit limit, you will probably be notified by your financial aid office. And they'll also talk about ways or the process on how you can actually increase that credit limit, so increase that percentage rate. But do keep in mind that if you are petitioning to increase that 150%, at that point, all your classes need to go directly towards your degree. So you wouldn't be able to take any elective classes, like maybe a yoga class or an art class. So those credits will have to go towards, or at that point, those credits will have to go towards your degree, okay? We do also advise students that if they are thinking of dropping or withdrawing out of classes during the term, talk to or call your financial aid officer, talk to your financial aid officer to see what that will do to your financial aid eligibility. Okay, because remember, we do need to be passing at least 67% of the classes that we are attempting. Okay, like PCC, all schools care about your success. So there are a lot of free resources out there for students, like counseling, career guidance, and tutoring. I definitely do encourage students to take advantage of these resources because they're here for your success. We want to make sure that you're graduating in a timely manner and that you are reaching your educational goals as quick as you need to. Okay, so the next screens will also be PCC specific, but it's basically just an example of what it might look like or a student portal might look like. So once you are admitted to a school, you'll probably get login information. You'll have access to something similar. Okay, so usually each school will have a student portal. That student portal is basically where all your student administrative stuff will be housed. Most likely you'll be able to register for classes on your portal, pay your bill on your portal, and obviously take a look at your financial aid information on your portal. So once you're admitted to a school, do become familiar with that school portal because you will need to go on there each term to do administrative stuff, like I said, register for your classes. Okay. At PCC, we have this handy dandy dashboard here. So if we needed a requirement, we would advise students to go to the second icon here. If there are no red flags, there won't be a requirement, and that means that we're not asking for additional information. Okay. Once a student is awarded, a student will be directed to an award letter. The school will send you instructions on how to access that information. And you can take a look to see what you're awarded and if you want to accept or decline any of the award that is offered to you. With your student account, usually financial aid and student accounts can go hand in hand. So for instance, at PCC, it's going to be under the same tab or in the same area for students on their portal. With the student account or your account, it'll have basically the charges that a student will have each term. And then once financial aid starts to come through, then that'll be there also, okay? Okay, and then usually if a school does need to contact students, they will either contact them to their school email address or to their student portal. It is the most secure way for us to communicate with students and preferred way we do. And most schools are the same. So make sure that the student is checking their email, especially after they've been admitted and after they've submitted their FAFSA form. Because like I said, most schools will send students information to their school email address. So now we're coming up to the additional resources for financial aid. So we did talk about the FAFSA process where you can get eligibility eligibility for state and federal financial aid. But if you needed other resources for financial aid, we can take a look at scholarship websites. So PCC has a foundation, a scholarship foundation, and a scholarship application portal. And most schools will have this. So contact your school if you can't find it, the school that you're interested in if you can't find it. But this will have vast information on what scholarships are going to be available through the institution. And they might have some resources for outside scholarships that the school or the institution is aware of, okay? Most schools usually have a Q&A kind of section. At PCC, we have Ask a Panther. You can submit your questions to financial aid, and I'm actually the Panther that will respond. So if you have any questions, you know, go to your institution's webpage and take a look at their contact information or their school information. You should be able to find information on how to navigate any questions that you might have. Okay. Are there any questions? There we go.
Hey there, Matt. I apologize. My internet went out momentarily. So I think we're at the point where you're ready for questions.
Yes, correct.
All right. I'm glad I'm back. So at this point, folks, if you do want to add questions to the chat, we'll be happy to respond to those. The first questions that have come in are regarding international students. So kind of a two-part question. Can international students apply for the FAFSA? And then what opportunities are available for international students who are on an L visa?
Sarah, can you remind me what an L visa is again?
Unfortunately, I'm not familiar with that either.
Okay. So with financial aid, you do need to be an eligible US citizen or non-citizen. So in most cases, international students won't be eligible to apply for FAFSA because they'll actually be here on a student visa, which is not aid eligible. So if you have your green card or your naturalization certificate, if you became a US citizen, you could then apply for financial aid, but unfortunately, most international students aren't eligible. International students are eligible for alternative loans. So if you go to a private bank or credit union, you might be able to get some loans there, but you will need a US resident cosigner. So sometimes that also is not eligible for international students. But for the most part, international students can apply for scholarships. They can see what is out there, do the scholarship searches. If the scholarship is specifically for a US citizen, it should say that. But for the most part, they should be able to apply for scholarships.
Thanks. That's the only questions we've got so far. So we'll give it just another minute. If folks have questions, please use the chat and ask questions so we can get
Sarah,
questions answered.
Sarah, did you have anything that you want me to expand on or any questions on your end?
No,
No?
that was super thorough. Trying to think of common questions students have, but
one thing I actually didn't talk about, there wasn't a real slide, was the cost of attendance. So cost of attendance to go to school, a student will get basically a whole rounded estimate of what it would cost to go to an institution. So a cost of attendance doesn't only include tuition and fees, but it also may include living components. So if you need to pay rent, or if you're a student, you're on a meal plan, we take that into consideration, or any room and board. We take transportation into consideration. And we take personal miscellaneous expenses into consideration. So there's a lot of things that go into what students will see as the cost of attendance. Now, what I advise students to do is when they're taking a look at that cost of attendance, take out what you don't need. So if you only need tuition and fees, concentrate on that amount. If you need tuition and fees and books and supplies, concentrate on that amount. If you don't need room and board, don't factor that into the financial aid award that you're trying to seek, because you've already got that taken care of. We want to make sure that you're getting the money or the most money that you need for the components that you actually need to pay for, if that makes sense.
Still no questions. So I think if we don't have any questions, we'll go ahead and wrap up this evening. So again, thank you all so much for being here tonight. Like I said at the beginning, this is the first of several different presentations this week. So please be sure to check that out. And I just got one more question, so we'll pose that to you, Matt. So FAFSA opens on October 1st. When does it close?
There actually is no real deadline for FAFSA as long as we are in the school year. But there are going to be some dates that students will need to pay attention to if they want to maximize on their financial aid eligibility. So for instance, if a student might want to maximize on some of the grant eligibility, the earlier you turn your FAFSA in, the better. If you turn in your FAFSA form late, so for instance, let's say you could pay for fall term on your own, but you needed FAFSA for winter term. At that point, we're probably only going to take a look at the Pell Grant eligibility and loan eligibility. So sometimes a state grant eligibility, the student won't have access to. Federal work study, for the most part, will be all awarded out, and maybe even some federal funds. So regardless of when you fill out your FAFSA form, as long as school is still in session, we can take a look at the Pell Grant eligibility and loan eligibility for the student.
So got another question, just can you talk more about scholarships? And so pretty broad. I'm thinking maybe addressing school specific scholarships and maybe some databases and anywhere you'd like to take that.
So with scholarships, it's a mixed bag. The first place that I normally tell students to look is at their school's website. Those will be school-specific scholarships, sometimes program-specific scholarships, depending on the school and their endowment or their foundation will, obviously determine those funding types. But that's where I normally tell students to start first, is start with your school. Take a look at their scholarship website or their foundation website. Like I said earlier too, those websites might have some additional resources or other sites that they can recommend. So for instance, a school might have the state organization scholarship application on their website. For Oregon, it's going to be the OSAC scholarship application. That's going to be a whole nother database that students can look for scholarships that are going to be specific to Oregon students. There's the web searches. You can go to Sallie Mae. They have a scholarship site. Scholarship books. I forget what that book title is that Marshana used to always promote. The Ultimate Scholarship Book. The Ultimate Scholarship Book. If you go to Amazon or to a bookstore, to the library, they should have those scholarship books. They are updated every year. So I do encourage students to take a look at that. And earlier when I said to diversify where you're looking for scholarships, the reason why I encourage that is students nowadays are only looking on the web. So a lot of these scholarships that are not web-based are not being awarded. So, that's going to be an untapped resource. An untapped resource is employment. So a lot of times parents don't realize that the company or the organization they're working for does have some sort of scholarship program for the parent or even for, any dependents or the student. So definitely take a look there. And within your community, A lot of times communities do have scholarships for students. They might be on the smaller scale, but it does add up. So if you get, if you apply for a scholarship that is only $100, do know that's going to be $100 less that you're going to have to put forward, or you're going to need to look for. A lot of times students will skip those smaller amount scholarships because they don't think that it's worth the time to apply for that scholarship, because it's not a big ticket item, if that makes sense. But ask yourself this: if I spend an hour working on a scholarship that is only $100, when was the last time I got paid $100 to do something for an hour? Okay, so a lot of times I do encourage students to take a look at those smaller scholarships because they are overlooked. And those probably are going to be not as competitive as, like I said, those big ticket items, such as those scholarships that might be $1,000 or $2,000.
And then along with scholarships, are there any good just financial aid, good public sites for finding financial aid and other money? So I put in the OSAC website. I put in just the FAFSA website. I included Oregon Goes to College.
Those websites are actually good. And I would definitely stick to either the school, state, or federal websites. You are going to see some websites out there that are for college coaching, but those are going to be paid. You should never pay for anything where this is concerned, because this is all free information that is available for the student. So those public websites, I would maybe hold off on. Talk to the financial aid office at the institution that you're interested in to see what information they have. If you have a specific website that you have in mind, ask the institution what their ideas are, if they've actually heard of the website. A lot of times organizations will start sending students emails, soliciting X, Y, and Z for a payment, and they can help you get into school or help you fill out your applications. But that's all free. Go to the institutions that you are interested in for help, or the institution in your area for general financial aid question.
And then this one is, what happens if you've paid for your college tuition, but then want to change colleges?
Okay. So basically, I tell students financial aid is non-transferable. We can take a look at the remaining eligibility the student has to transfer to the other school. But at that point, a student might not be eligible for some of the awards that they have at their current institution. So for instance, if you're going to PCC fall term and you decide you want to transfer to PSU starting the winter term, if you got federal work study, let's say you got Pell Grant, federal work study, and loans at PCC, at that point, PSU might not have any federal work study money left or eligibility left. So what we can take a look at is the Pell Grant and the loan eligibility for the next terms that the student will be there.
And I think just emphasizing that tuition is generally paid on a term basis. It's not a full year basis.
Correct. So when you're taking a look at your cost of attendance or your award letter, do keep in mind that it's going to be split up into the terms that your school has. So for instance, at PCC, we have summer, fall, winter, and spring. But a student is only responsible for the payment for the term that they're going into, if that makes sense. So let's say your tuition is going to be $4,000, $1,000 each term. Payments are only going to be, or the student is only going to be responsible of a quarter of that $4,000 for the year. So it's going to be split up, like $1,000 each term. Does that make sense, or did I get myself confused?
No, I got it. Okay. Yeah, I think that's important to clarify. All right, questions have slowed down at this point. So again, I'll go ahead and start wrapping us up for this evening. And I'll keep an eye out and see if anything else comes in. But again, thank you all so much for coming to this presentation, and a big thank you to Matt for spending your evening supporting our Beaverton students and families. This has been really helpful. So as families, I hope you'll join us for other presentations this week. And with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up and say, have a good evening, and we'll see you soon.
Good night.